With it being Halloween month, everybody is talking about their horror games at the moment, and remakes are all the rage these days. Capcom have been great proponents of this movement, really kickstarting it a good few years ago with the Resident Evil 2 remake in 2019, and then number 3 a year later. Now it's the turn of the revolutionary Resident Evil 4, with a game that dragged the genre away from fixed cameras towards third-person views and more action-orientated horror, now getting its own ground-up remake. From one perspective, there's an innate appeal to a remake such as this. Resident Evil 4 is still regarded as an all-time classic, but it still has some of those early 2000s game design quirks, and when you see the leap forward that the other Resi remakes have been able to take graphically, then the potential to breathe a much darker visual atmosphere into this game is clear. We got to go hands-on with a slice of Resident Evil 4's remake, from pretty much the very start of the game through to the end of the tone-setting battle for survival in the village. And the vast steps forward were immediately apparent. If there's one thing that deserves to be consigned to the annals of gaming history, it's tank controls, unless of course you are driving a tank. Sure, the restricted movement that this gave you was kind of a part of the older horror games' build-up for tension and fear, your restricted field of vision and motion forcing you to play more strategically, but there's other much better ways to get similar effects these days. Resident Evil 4 now lets you sidestep, you can move whilst aiming, albeit slowly, and there's much more flexibility and more abilities within combat as a whole. We'll come back to that in a second though. That initial trudge through the woods to the isolated cabin has got a very different tone in this game. There's now an inky blackness to the forest around you, a low-hanging mist that is tapping into classic horror movie vibes, and there's more of the foreboding imagery tucked into the surroundings. This contrasts with the very, very brown aesthetic that the original game had, setting the trend on the PlayStation 2 and the GameCube for the generation that was to follow. It's such a different look, and the layout is subtly shifted in such a way that it wasn't until coming up to the house itself that I understood where I was. That house has also been transformed, going from a relatively small building which contained basically just one main room and a tiny little upstairs area to something with much more living space. It's still falling into disrepair though, and the narrative beats that play out here take what was in the original and build on top of them. Speaking of the narrative, I almost feel like it's a shame for the old Metal Gear Solid style talking head radio communications to be thrown in the garbage alongside the tank controls, but it also allows the cutscenes team to really shine. Coming across a room filled with clues and information, Leon calls in with Hunnigan and the camera now cuts between his talking to her office as they chit-chat and plan the next steps. Not much later, while escaping the house, we still get the campy kind of Bond-esque quips and humour from Leon, so you don't need to worry because Capcom knew that if they didn't, fans would have been going mad over the changes. There is just this general feeling that while Resident Evil 4 will retain the same overarching layout and progression through the story, Capcom is also revising many elements and improving the flow. When it makes sense, that is. The path from the house to the village itself is shortened significantly, you get to the bridge quicker, you have fewer buildings to ransack, but then you get to that village and it feels almost identical to that original game. All of the buildings are in the same places, many of the side paths and escape routes remain, and there's a similar, if not identical, kind of patrol that the villagers take when they're going around this central pyre. Fans of the original game will know exactly what to expect when they take a few steps forward and trigger the first real encounter with Los Ganados. Tackling this encounter with the much freer movement style, it will really feel like you're able to take on Los Ganados with much greater ease than before, and that's only enhanced by some of the new tricks that Leon has been taught. For one thing, you can now use his knife for stealth takedowns, helping to thin potential hordes coming at you before they even know that you're there. And that knife really comes in useful once things kick off. If you're grabbed, you can still mash the X button in order to escape, but you will be losing health as you do so, and so you might resort to whipping out the knife and stabbing them in the head in order to escape much more quickly. Similarly, incoming attacks can potentially be blocked with a well-timed knife parry. This will even lop off someone's hands if they don't actually have a weapon and are trying to punch you. And the knife can withstand Dr. Salvador's over-the-top chainsaw attacks. And that chainsaw can have some effects on the environment as well. All of this added flexibility, though, comes with the caveat that the knife has a durability in this game, and that quickly drains through use. You will be able to fix it up later on, but it is a finite resource in a particular situation. Thankfully, you don't have to worry about that too much because Leon still has his reliable 1-2 hit of shooting to stagger and then delivering a roundhouse kick to finish off an enemy. In general, though, it's just not as claustrophobic feeling as the original game. Again, tank controls were a big part of that, and so was playing on a 4x3 screen all the way back on the GameCube and PlayStation 2. But things like having the breakable knife show how Capcom are giving with one hand and taking with the other. There's certain tricks like hiding up in the tower that might have worked in the original, but aren't as reliable in the remake. But then on the other hand, you can now shoot the lantern out in the stable and the cow gets set on fire and goes on a bit of a rampage. I'm sure that Resident Evil fans will delight in discovering all of the new possibilities and the little changes that have been made. There's obviously no way that Resident Evil 4's remake will be anywhere near as revolutionary or trend-setting as the original, but Capcom's considered approach to updating the game will make sure that it's not being left behind either. This game looks fantastic, it plays with a modern flair, but it finally balances that modernity with the need to stay true to the original. We can't wait to see more of this game, which is coming out on the 24th of March in 2023 for PlayStation 5 and PlayStation 4, Xbox Series X and S, and PC. Hopefully you've enjoyed what you've seen in this video, and if you have, then I'd like to ask you to click the like button, subscribe, the bell icon, all of the usual YouTube things before you go, and hopefully we will see you again soon. Goodbye!
Kill me for the repairs later.